I'm really honored to be introducing Sandy today, because today's the first time we've met in person and we've been connected on LinkedIn for a while, so this is really exciting. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Goodfish Business Corp, a position he took in January 2013. The successful group of companies is owned by the Whitefish Lake First Nation, number 128, and provides various products and services to the petroleum industry. Sandy is a member of the Mikisew Cree First Nation in Fort Chipewyan and has served as a board member for the Aboriginal Human Resource Council and the Circle for Aboriginal Relations. With a strong background in business development and consultation, Sandy's efforts have been recognized by the Alberta Chamber of Commerce through their Premier's Award of Distinction. Coupled with this, Sandy has served as an executive in the post-secondary sector. Please join me in welcoming Sandy.
Okay, so we got about 20-25 minutes, so I'm just going to dive right into this. So I'm not going to give you any funny jokes or anything like that. But what I'm going to tell you right off the bat is, of course I don't know everything. I'm just going to share my perspectives on some of my examples, what I've seen from different levels, having worked with everything from executives in industry to ministers and premiers and offices. Really, I guess my perspective comes from being First Nation, living in Alberta, having worked in post-secondary. As mentioned, I've been at the level of a vice president of a college in Alberta. I am originally from Mikisew, or I am a Mikisew member from the Fort Chipewyan area and Fort Smith area. So, getting right into it. So a scenario I use with a lot of our staff when we talk about is the dripping ceiling scenario. And I think it's going to play nicely into Dennis's example we were talking about, because I think when we look at Aboriginal, we got to be focused on the right things. And I got to tell you, I'm really concerned nationwide that we never are focused on the right things. So we got a leak in the ceiling taking place up here. It's dripping. So I'm going to put the spoon here. I'm going to catch the water. So what's going to happen when that spoon gets filled? Well, I'm going to have to move to the cup. What's going to happen when the cup gets filled? Well, I'm going to have to move to something bigger. So at some point, I need to be able to ask myself, when am I going to stop dealing with the symptoms, and when am I going to start dealing with the real issues? And I think that's a big problem we have in Canada. We've been through a lot. I'm going to say very loosely, a lot of us are, I think all of us are victims of some bad policy that's taken place in the last 100, 150 years. It's really given us a distorted view of terms of where we are. So when I talk about business, it's important to understand what the business is, but we also have to understand, if you're doing business in Aboriginal, you need to understand that we got to focus on dealing with the symptom, but we can't get so self-involved and not recognize that we got to deal with the issue of some sort. And that's what we're starting to see right now in Canada through different cases, through different people coming out and speaking, that they're saying, holy crap, that's not just a little drip. We can start to see the friggin' sky here. So we got to start focusing on that a little bit more. So what I've done is I've just broken this down to 3 things I wanted to chat with you about. And I really believe they're all systemic. And again, I'm going to say things how I say it, and I apologize. I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm just my perspective. So ask. Canada's got some real bad ignorance going on. We just got to call it that. That's the brutal fact. You know, let's not pretend. You know, when I was young, let's face it, you know, this is not going to come out right, but when I was young, we never played Holocaust. We played cowboys and Indians. What's the difference? Both are a genocide. But somewhere along the way, we've been brainwashed to think that it's okay to play cowboys and Indians, and it's okay to pretend you're Buffalo Bill. But when would we ever play Schindler's List in our backyard? And say, you know what, I'm going to save you guys and write you safe down from the Holocaust. But let's be realistic. We need to address the brutal facts. We have a misinterpretation of the history of North America, Europeans coming in, of the agreements that were signed. So I want to talk about that really quick. Oops, didn't even do that. Second thing I want to talk about is understanding the roles and entities. We're not playing with oranges and oranges. We've got oranges, we've got apples, we've got grapefruits. We're dealing with 3 big main components. One of them is industry. Industry is what? Corporation. Aboriginal nations, more of a social organization. We got 2 foreign entities. Historically, we know that one trumped the other. If you look back to a nation called Ujibugamo, over in Quebec. True fact, not too long ago, Ojibwe, the nation, was relocated more than 12 times in 60 years by government and industry. So let me ask you as homeowners here, what would you think if somebody showed up to the door and said, move your house? Ain't gonna happen. Try that with a farmer in Alberta. Move your farm. No way. But why is it then okay that Canada has done that to a nation that's been here for thousands and thousands of years? So I want to chat a little bit about that quickly. And just the dynamics of those three different entities. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong button, wow. And then I think the last one I really want to touch base on is, again, touching on Aboriginal business capacity. I work for a corporation. I don't report to a chief of council. I report to a board of directors. My chairman is Peter Elzinga. If the name ring a bell, Peter Elzinga used to be a minister and right-hand man to the provincial government for years and years. That's important. That is so important. So we're going to talk a little bit about Aboriginal business and why that's really important. So, okay, Canada's ignorance. This just came out actually last week, and I thought it was really important. And Bob, you've been sharing this message for a long time as well too. Sean Atleo said Aboriginal history not being taught well enough. So this is about 3 or 4 months ago. I live in Sherwood Park, and we're part of the Edmonton Catholic Elk Island School District, I think it's called. One of the schools came up with a brand new sports program, and we thought, wow, that'd be perfect for our son. So we went over to the school district and said, we'd like to move our child out of this district and put him in this district. And the response I got is that, well, unless you're French or unless you're Ukrainian, we can't move you out of district. When did this happen? And I'm thinking, whoa, I missed something here. Because suddenly, there's an issue around equity and equality in terms of, things that are offered. But that's what's starting to happen. And I don't criticize people of those cultures. Kudos to them, because I think it's really important that they embrace that. But while we're doing that, we need to be respectful and understanding and constantly step outside the box and look at what it is we're doing and how it's impacting other things. Because if you take the amount of time that the first Europeans have been here and you put it on a graph, you get it about that thick. And if you point it up against the Aboriginal nations, they got about a good 14,000 years on us. I was at my in-laws' Thanksgiving, and my wife's aunt and uncle are farmers, and they're real rednecks. So anyways, we like to get into it once in a while. They were complaining about the deficit and the government and this problem, and I said, there was no problem 400 years ago. I said, it's all starting to happen within the last 400 years. I said, before then, there was no issues. So anyway, Sean Atleo made this great statement, and again, it was really talking about says that even highly educated Canadians know little about Aboriginal history. And I think that gets to your point, Dennis, because I totally agree. All of us that are in this room, we're here for the right reason. So sometimes when you come to this, we're preaching to the choir, The reality is the ones that really don't get it, and I'll say this, are high-level politicians, our corporate leaders, and I'm even going to stick my neck out to say some of our First Nation leaders as well, too, because it's only fair. Those three organizations lack the ability to understand each other enough to be able to work together. And unfortunately, what that leaves is us at the bottom. We're trying to make the best out of it and making things happen. So, Sean Atleo talked a little bit about the 250th anniversary of the Royal Proclamation. Quick show of hands, who knows what the Royal Proclamation is? Okay, this Royal Proclamation, you gotta know what it is. Like, it's amazing. I've been involved in Aboriginal awareness programs with executives, and after it, they're going, oh my God, why didn't anybody tell me this? I thought we killed you guys off. I thought we took all your land. What you're going to find in the Royal Proclamation is there was a war that took place. And after the war, King George III essentially said, you guys have welcomed us here. You guys have kept us alive. You guys have fought with us. We will respect you guys. We will respect the nations, and we will live together. Unfortunately, and I'll get to it a little bit later, but even pointing out Alan Gregg. Does everyone know who Alan Gregg is? He's He's a Tory strategist. If you go to Alan Gregg's website right now, he's wrote a paper called Tecumseh's Ghost, which really is talking about the Royal Proclamation and why it is that every single one of us in Canada needs to know what the Royal Proclamation is. But he talks about the role that the First Nation people played in us not being Americans right now. That's really what he talks about. The other thing that is phenomenal is Alan Gregg is a graduate, PhD in Canada. And you know what he said? I graduated not knowing anything about who Tecumseh was. How the heck is that? So our education system, whether if it's from the elementary to the high level, it's just really failing us in terms of being able to set the stage straight in terms of what is really important and what is our history. But people are starting to figure it out, you know. The reason the Gateway Pipeline is not gone through yet, people know there's Aboriginals still have something, you know. I got to tell you, you know, I'm not originally from here, but when I started coming to school in around here, I started to get sick about how many people would tell me about how I've got a free truck over in Wetaskiwin that I can pick up. You know, because where Matthew and I come from, we get $5 a year. Anyway, this is the gentleman, another name you need to know a little bit about as well, too. So this is the guy who got in between King George III and where we are today. Duncan Campbell Scott. Now, he had two lives. One life is he headed up the whole Indian Northern Affairs, and he was the one who wrote the policy of assimilation. So this is to say, in quote, it's on letterhead, government letterhead, he was going to deal with the Indian issue we have in Canada. This is our government, not 500 years ago. We're talking about within the last century here. So what his role is to create residential schools, pull people in from residential schools, and guess what happened during that process? Well, they weren't teaching our parents and some of us about First Nations and about the Royal Proclamation. Why? Because the intention was to create assimilation. So where does that put us today? That puts a lot of us in a role where we really don't understand the history of what's going on, and I put myself in that as well too. Because I grew up knowing more about the Roman Empire than I knew about my own culture growing up. So, Duncan Campbell Scott, unfortunately, he was also a poet as well, and if you go in Toronto, they've got a stained glass window about how great Duncan Campbell Scott is, but if you were asked a lot of First Nations, I'm sure they would love to take some rocks to that window. Anyway, some examples of what we're seeing here. Look at this. The Federation of Law Societies recommended last year that all new lawyers called to the bar have some knowledge of Aboriginal rights. All lawyers. We're not talking about whether you want to major in it. We're saying you need to know this if you want to get into Aboriginal law. Why? Because it's all coming back down to the Royal Proclamation. That's what it's all stemming to. You want to talk about resources, you want to talk about land, you want to talk about people, you want to talk about rights. It's all stemming right back to the source document we have here. University of British Columbia said mandatory. Got it out. And it's a reality. The other thing which I kind of talked about really quickly as well is in terms of whether we're targeting the right audience. When I had worked in Aboriginal affairs, I got to be honest with you. After working in it a few years, I really found that my role was not so much going out and working with Aboriginal communities, but it was really focusing in on the internal climate and culture of the organization to determine whether or not they really understood Aboriginal. Because our policies and our processes for the way we did business did not flow properly with the people we were trying to work with. So when we had our president show up, and he would go, oh yeah, we'll do this, and we'll hire this, and we'll hire this. Well, then they would run the policies, and none of that would work, because it wasn't in line with it. And so how did it come out? Well, it came out as just chatter. And that's what continuously frustrates. So anyway, that's kind of the spiel, my thoughts in terms of the ignorance. Why is it important? Because when we sit down and we talk about business, this is an issue. I get, personally, I'm just going through it right now with one of the companies. So I'm doing this multi-million-dollar deal right now on a service rig with a company, and we are negotiating at the table with their key procurement people and their vice president of drilling. And so what happens is that, boom, so I send a message directly to the vice president. Well, who picks up and phones me? The Aboriginal Relations Advisor. So finally I had to tell him very nicely, I said, you know, I actually speak English. You know, I'm actually okay and fluent in English, and I know how to use the phone, and I know how to use the computer, so help me understand why you're getting in the way of me trying to do this deal. And he says, well, that's my job. And I said, well, get out of here, essentially. I don't need you here, because you're just slowing me down. But that's part of their understanding of what his role is and what his role needs to be played. And so I don't just say that to criticize and to mock, but I say that to say, you know what, we've got to stand back and we've got to look at some of these little things and say, you know what, are we doing this right? You know, maybe 40, 60 years ago, yeah, but you look at a lot of the nations now, we're talking PhDs, we're talking lawyers, we're talking doctors, we're talking executives, we're talking multimillionaires. We're not talking about this whole assimilation Indian problem anymore, so times are really changing. Understanding the role of entities. So this is one, I think, that I mentioned to you before. Take a corporation. Their goal is to maximize shareholder equity. Make us money. It's owned by shareholders. Each of them are investing their own money and they want to make money. And that is cool. And that's how economics work and that's how the world spins around. But if you look at an Aboriginal nation, it's more of a social entity. And historically what we've seen is that industries really stepped over and trumped over social. And part of that, again, I think is a lot of the misunderstanding that we've had in terms of what is the role of a lot of these nations. Because if Duncan Campbell Scott had his way, there would be no more First Nations, right? We'd all be just equal. So what we've got down here is a little bit of a Venn diagram I like to use, and this is where I think we've got big issues. We've got government, industry, and government kind of folding over, trying to work things out at the top.
How come you use Aboriginal, the big industry, corporate world?
No, I use Aboriginal because if I use just First Nations, then I'm excluding the Métis and the Inuit. So I just use Aboriginal to kind of encompass it all.
But the only thing is, that works if you're talking about situations that apply to the Inuit. But if you're really talking about First Nations, because the Métis don't really like it if you call something Aboriginal, but you're really talking about First Nations.
Oh. I'm using Aboriginal nations. Everybody gets the point. So what we've got in the Venn diagram is this part right here that folds over. This is where all three really need to come together. Historically what we've had is that these Venn diagrams, they haven't been together. And whether you want to break this Aboriginal one into the three type of a thing, it's not working, it's not talking together. You know, in all honesty, the government is building their policies with who? Well, with themselves. You know, whether they want to talk about consultation and such like that, this might be part of consultation. But it's really got to be with the heads and leads of some of these people so that they understand, because they all do speak different languages. Industry understands profit, therefore it's easy to share in that language. I got to tell you, I think it's insulting when I see industry have a conference and they bring the newest made Indian millionaire up and they get them this, they talk about how great